find your friends, and better off know if your friends will be there when times are tough. That's probably even just as much important. And they're definitely going to figure that out here in this one. But let's see a little bit more about what this is about, starting with the IMDb plot. Amber and her friends visit Joshua Tree for a fun girls' trip, but face hostility from locals. Those damn locals. As tensions escalate and Amber's dark past surfaces, their rebellion ignites, turning their desert getaway into a jaw-dropping game of revenge. Okay. Alright, so this one recently released on Shudder. Um, I guess we'll try to keep this spoiler free, maybe some minor twists and turns here and there. Um, I will say, I really wasn't sure whether yes or no I was going to watch this or not. Um, I kind of was hoping that it was going to be horror and that's kind of, that direction. Then I kind of, as I was sharing it and the information for it, I kind of got the gist that this was kind of more of maybe a thriller, which it is listed here on IMDb as a psychological thriller and thriller. So, I was kind of, at first thinking along the lines of, we have a killer out there and, maybe a certain person's going to get separated from their friends and, what happened to them and so forth. And we're going to go like that. But then, kind of realizing that, maybe it was more of a thriller, that maybe this movie was going to be something different and not totally in that direction. And, definitely the more I shared it, I kind of got that gist. And then once people started posting a few things about it, so I really debated, yes or no, we're going to watch this or not. But then eventually decided to check this out. And I will definitely say that it probably was in that kind of direction. Definitely not a true, even though there are probably, a good moment or two of horror in it, as far as, people dying and definitely a tough body part scene to watch. And I'll leave it at that. Later on in this movie, um, it definitely turned out to be a little bit different, and I'll try to tackle that kind of carefully in a few moments as I kind of get to that discussion part of the discussion. Um, but yeah, I guess to kind of set things up here in why this kind of is going to be a little bit tough discussion here in a moment. What we have here is a group of friends, and they're partying and so forth. Obviously, a group of girls here, they're having fun, and at one point, I think the movie kind of started off. They were on like a boat or whatever, and it's docked and so forth. And everybody's kind of having fun, drinking this and that. Um, One of the girls ends up kind of going into a room with a guy, and it kind of starts off in what you feel is kind of a consensual way and so forth. Uh, but then as it goes on, the girl doesn't want to go as far as the guy. And it gets a little dicey and so forth. And, you know, she has to struggle to get her way out of it. Um, that kind of triggers her, and as the party kind of continues after this. Let's just say this group of friends, basically because of that incident and whatever, are no longer really welcomed in this party, so they have to leave. So we kind of get that kind of set up. The girls leave and whatever, blah blah. Then we get to learn a little bit more about the girls as they check into this, hotel, small hotel, in the middle of basically nowhere. And as they're doing their fun and whatever, I think along the way, we get sprinkled in, them meeting some of the locals. There is a guy in this hotel that they're staying at, and he's annoyed that they're there. I think there's one or two other interactions with groups of people that as they go, that, kind of shows that they're not fond of, the non-locals or the people that are coming to this area and what they do. So, these group of girls, this group of girls is not exempt to that, as they're trying to get their party on. And so as we meet, again, you're gonna meet the different girls and their different relationships and so forth. And keep in mind the name of the game here is Find Your Friends. So is this group of girls really friends at the end of the day? How solid are they going to be when things head south in different ways? And like I said, they're going to have some brush ups with locals. And then I think one of the problems here is Amber. She's the main girl here, and this past struggle of the incident that she just that she had went through with this guy in the bedroom. Obviously, there's something that she's struggling with, that she's triggered easily by. I didn't catch whether maybe she was, and maybe they said it or not. Maybe she was raped at one time, or maybe she was just abused, or something to that effect. Where a guy took advantage of her, and so she's easily triggered as this movie goes on. Every time maybe they meet somebody, meet a new group of guys, come across other people, she can be easily triggered. She's sometimes even a little bit triggered by even her friends at times. So that's obviously going to cause a little bit of issues here and there as this movie kind of unfolds. Some, again, I don't know if I want to say, too much. Things are going to get worse for the girls. Some of them are going to have it rougher than others, I'll say. And, obviously the movie's called Find Your Friends, so that means, said girl X, Y, and Z might go missing, might be dead or whatever, blah, blah, leaving the others to, kind of have to figure it out. So who is doing it, why, and so forth. We have to kind of cover those bases and so forth. And then, let's just say, some sort of extreme kind of scenes kind of happen after that. But in the end, I think, we've kind of seen, that kind of thing before, and some similarities of these themes in horror movies before, even though, or thriller movies before. But I guess, my large takeaway, as this movie kind of wraps up, as we kind of see the movie end, and so forth, yes, I was a little bit disappointed for a couple of reasons. One, again, it really to what I had eventually suspected, it really wasn't horror, and so forth. Even though it did have like I said, a crazy scene or two towards the end, and there are some deaths in this movie. It wasn't directly horror and the horror the way I would want it to, per se, blood and guts and that kind of thing, even though, again, there's a moment or two. But I think, when, and this is without, doing any extra reading or where this story came from, where this movie came from, or anything like that. But after, watching the movie and the way it ended or whatever, I kind of felt like, this was kind of a display of, and there's nothing wrong with it. And again, I say, movies, thrillers, horror, whatever, if you want to use it as an example and to empower or talk about an issue or whatever, blah, blah, that's all fine and good. Might not necessarily be something that I, wanted to watch or felt the need to watch or so forth or whatever. But I think, one of the things that kind of I took away when the movie kind of wrapped up was kind of, this movie was to was made to kind of show a couple of things. One to kind of show, this girl's trauma, whatever it is that she went through, whether she was raped or abused or whatever it is that she went through, and that kind of issue, and kind of how it stuck with her, and then how it didn't help as they kind of met people, as the movie went on. Again, another issue of girls, and I would say, it was kind of weird watching, there's a scene where they're all in the car, and talking about, their relationships and the relationships with guys and things they've done and whatever. As a guy watching, them all talk so freely about it, that was a little weird. Not completely surprising, but it was a little weird, to be honest. But I guess it's just more, I guess maybe in a touch of way relatable to a woman, and again, I don't mean to offend anybody in talking about any of this, and again, props to the movie and whatever, no problem with the direction they took and so forth, but showing her and her issues, and then showing how her relationship with the girls and so forth, and how that kind of, maybe some were a little bit more sympathetic to hers while others weren't, and so forth, and some just were there to have fun, and they viewed her as kind of being a drag on that fun and so forth, and then just almost making it girl empowerment at a certain point, and by that I mean like towards the end, some of the stuff that happens there. Again, I watch and enjoy plenty of horror movies, and I've even said it in other reviews. I love watching, a kick-ass woman go and get revenge and kill everybody, who's done her wrong and so forth. Ready or Not, like we just had part 2, this time we had 2 women kicking ass and killing everybody, whatever. I don't have a problem with that, and that's fun, but I guess to me it just seemed like this movie, obviously, that is horror and taking it in a little bit more of a fun, we're going to kill a bunch of people way, and this was a little tad too serious, and obviously, at least to me, in my eyes, was kind of showing, maybe some issues and whatever, and wanted to show a little bit more meaning behind it, and, I just wasn't up for that, or didn't, not really what I wanted to watch. Again, nothing wrong with the way they went about it, and it's fine. I'm sure there are people that appreciate the issues here, and to display that, and to show, a different, a route that this could go in, maybe a little bit extreme in some ways, but whatever, and that's fine, but it's just not, at the end of the day, kind of what I truly wanted to watch, and so forth, and whatever. So, I guess you can take that either way. Surprisingly, here on IMDb, it doesn't show that. It doesn't look like a lot of people even watch this movie. Didn't really get a great rating, and I don't want to, like, extremely punish it for that. Again, it's important that, these topics are talked about in one way or the other. But again, not really what I wanted to watch at the end of the day. And when the movie ended, I didn't want to feel that I was, feeling that way. I wanted to say, did I like the movie? Did I not like the movie? Whatever. But I was more kind of feeling like, the movie was made for that, and I didn't really want to end the movie and feel like that. So with that, I think I'm just going to give this movie 2 pools of blood. That is out of 5. Not that the movie was horrible or whatever, but just, not what I wanted. So 2 pools of blood out of 5. So with that, horrorsquadreviews.blogspot.com is where you can find all my reviews, written in video, certainly tons of video reviews for a while now. So you can like and subscribe and do everything else that everybody wants you to do here on YouTube. If not, no worries, it's okay. I thank you for your time regardless. Blue Sky, Facebook information down below. Feel free to reach out, talk about this movie, horror, you want me to review something, fine with that. And definitely down in the comment section, your thoughts are always welcome. So with that, I will catch you on the next review, horror fans.